Hello lovely artists! Just recording a quick little tutorial on how to use traditional watercolor paint on a regular piece of printer paper. Part of this project is to do this kind of worksheet where we're really starting to work with blending, mixing, using our complementary colors, creating secondary and tertiary colors with our primaries. That's our first step in this next project. So I want to talk to you about how you can modify the typical process of watercolor in order to use a traditional printer paper or same old usual printer paper, thin regular piece of paper. It's definitely doable. Normally we wouldn't use this. Of course we would use watercolor paper, which is much heavier, thicker pressed paper that holds water without getting all wonky and wobbly. But a quick little modification and then we can actually use this really easily. So you can see here I have red, or the first thing, I'm mixing two primary colors to create a secondary color. So in this example specifically, I'm using red plus yellow, and I'm going to create orange. So I'm just going to show you how I can do that. I've already brought some red over here on the side, which you can see in my palette lid. Now I've just dipped my paintbrush into water, so as soon as I have a really watery tone, I know that it's going to be thinner and turn out lighter. So we know, or we will learn as we move along in this watercolor unit, that the more pigment we have and the less water we have, the richer our saturation of color. When we're creating a value scale is when specifically we would use that. So what I'm doing, I've kind of filled my paintbrush with paint, and instead of going right onto my paper, because I've got as much water right now as my brush can pick up, instead I'm going to come over here to my paper towel and just do my initial dot on the paper towel. Toilet paper, Kleenex, whatever you got, just do that first dot. That's going to actually remove kind of the extra water from your brush, and now actually I can paint much easier and it doesn't get nearly as saturated. So I've got a nice bold bright red, and I'm going to paint in my circle here. You can be as loosey-goosey as you want. You can be as tight in the lines as you want. This is all just a practice. Okay, so now you can see I've filled my circle, but it doesn't feel super soaked and saturated. It doesn't feel like this is going to ruin my paper, which is awesome. The big step here, the critical step, is that very first thing I do is I dab the initial dot of water onto paper towel, and now I can still apply the paint, but it's not soaking wet. So I'm going to clean my brush and do the same thing all the way along. So I know over the years, if you've heard or played in watercolor, of course you're always going to be using watercolor paper, but in times like this we are creative, and we can definitely do this entire practice in watercolor paint on this cheap printer paper and make it work by doing just this single dab. So I've got, if you saw me, I picked up my yellow pigment, my yellow paint. It's definitely fully saturated on my brush. Now I'm going to do that initial dab just to get rid of it. I might even do two because I can see I've got lots on this brush. Two dabs to get rid of the original or the main part of the water, and now I can paint easy peasy without totally soaking or over soaking my paper. And you can see that I'm just painting it to fill it. I'm definitely not going over and over again. If I was to continue to apply paint here and continue rubbing, then this would fall apart. The paper would fall apart. Maybe I'll do that really quick. Actually, let's get the orange down, and then I'm going to show you what happens if you continue to go over top. So I'm going to pull some red pigment, if you can see, and then I'm going to pull some yellow. I'm going to make a quick little orange because it takes so little paint. I think this is what's so funny. Taking a look at this palette, it looks like I have almost no paint at all, which is crazy. But you need so very little in the world of watercolor, and especially even less when you're doing something like this and I'm painting tiny little circles. So very much doable. Just gonna dot it on my paper towel a little bit, make sure I got rid of some, and here we go. Orange it is. Now I'm gonna work thin, and that is totally cool. All I'm really doing here is a practice of mixing and blending those colors. And there I have some red, some yellow. It's not the best orange, the brightest orange, but that's okay. We're not gonna saturate it because the paper will be ruined. And so that's what I'm gonna show you right now, is if I was to continue painting layer upon layer onto this printer paper, my paper will actually disintegrate, the fibers will get thin. So I'm just gonna keep painting over top of this, add some more color, and you're gonna see this is not gonna work. It's already starting to get wobbly. The paper is fully saturated. Hopefully you can see it's starting to really get wonky. And if I continue to rub, I'm actually loosening some paper fibers. There you go, now you can see it. So now I'm actually starting to get paper fibers pulling up off my page. That's all the little crumbles that you're starting to see. Ooh, there you can see them. So that is actual paper fibers, and it just means I'm essentially tearing my page apart. I'm doing this on purpose to show you how quickly it can fall apart. So you really have to be thoughtful. So there you can see all these little crumbles. This is actual paper fibers, so it doesn't take long if you keep rubbing that paint over and over again to go through your paper, and look what happens. Bah, right? Ruined. Okay, so is it doable? Absolutely. It is most definitely doable to paint watercolor paper on a traditional printout, but you have to be thoughtful. Step number one, of course, is when I grab my paint, just dab that initial 1 or 2 water drops off your brush. You can kind of see if it's totally full. If the paintbrush is completely full, it's got too much on it, right? You can see it's actually kind of thick with almost like a drop of water. So just get those initial ones off and then paint. Then of course you're going to paint apply your paint once. Just fill it once. Do not go over and over it again, because the whole thing will crumble and fall apart. Okay, again, completely doable. This entire page, very, very doable with watercolor. Paint, just be so thoughtful that you're just filling each circle once. Just go over it once, and then of course just dab the extra water off your brush. Cool beans. All right, we're ready to roll. Definitely doable. It's kind of mind-boggling, but you can definitely create pretty solid watercolor paint pieces on printer paper. Okay, see ya.